once this is unscrewed, I'll get that screwed in a minute. Try to do this with wee phone's a bit of a nightmare, but take this little screw out. It's alright. Okay, put that to the side. It's a good idea always just to line everything up you take out too, that way you know the kind of order things come out. So once this little screw's out, this just kind of unclips off here. That way you won't break the servo when you take the axle off, because once it's removed that's a pretty fragile part and you don't want to replace that. So on to the next stage. Okay, now that's disconnected. Now we've got to do is we've got to disconnect the shaft here, which you can see it's quite hard to see in the camera, but this little shaft, which point my pair of pliers, so a bolt up here, got to remove that little 2mm bolt, and also disconnect the shocks at the bottom on the left and the right hand side. So that'll be the next part I'll be taking off. Okay, now all these parts are disassembled, just got the drive shaft to take off, but before we do that, what I'd like to show you is just a good idea for your little screws and things is, if you get these kind of magnetic trays here, they're pretty good just to keep your screws in, that way when everything's on it, you know it's not going to go anywhere. If you drop the tray, they're still going to be there. It'll save you a lot of hassle down the line, bending on your knees looking on the floor for screws. I've all been there and done that, and it's just an absolute nightmare. Okay, so it's not actually till you actually take the whole portal axle out, you can actually see how much dirt can actually get into it and the damage it could potentially do. If you can see inside the little swivel joints here, you can see there's loads of opportunity for dirt and grit to get in there. Looks like I've actually got quite a bit of mine to clean out. Obviously the other side's much the same, and most importantly you've got to watch the little drive bearing here, so you really want to make sure that's really lubed up and greased. So once you strip this all down, we'll make sure it's got plenty of grease in there, all the dirt's cleaned out, and everything's running as smooth as it should do. Okay, for the next part of this video, I'm going to have to take these sort of axle steering mounts off. So all there basically is a 2mm bolt at the top and a 2mm bolt at the bottom. So you take these off on either side. I've kind of half done this side already, and once you've got that off, these shafts will just kind of pull out. You can see how much dirt's to be cleaned out this one already, so mine's is clearly worth doing. But take note when you do it, at the top and at the bottom, when you take them out, I'll show you just now, there's, hands are dirty if it works, apologise for this, but there's little bush ends in each one. I don't know if this will focus in. Finally. So do not lose them, make sure you put them straight back on the bolt, because that's crucial to keeping everything all straight. Without that, everything will be loose and just wriggling around and it won't be too good, so make sure you don't lose them. Next stage now will be to open up the diff and clean all that out, take everything apart, which we'll go through in a second, but I'll just go over this again on how important this is. As you can see how much rubbish, I mean, my TRX4 is only about 6 months old. Granted, I take it in the mud, it's been in the sea a couple of times. I always kind of spray it and lube it for the outside after every run, but even still, you can see how much gunk gets in there. So, as well as damaging bearings and just literally damaging all things, seals, etc., that's just going to add friction onto the wheels, onto the drivetrain, and just it'll drain battery. You won't get as much speed, it won't be as smooth. So it's very important to make sure this is all clean. After this, I might be doing it a lot more regular. Maybe every 2-3 months I might do this as opposed to 6, because for me knowing how much I look after it and still seeing how much dirt's getting in there, this is something you really want to avoid. Okay, I've just loosened these off slightly just so it's easier to pry off for the video to take a bit less time. But the next stage, what you want to do is get a good old 2mm Allen key again, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts to take off there. And once you take them off, as you'll see just now, done. 1, 2, 3 and 4. Once you've got these all out, your front case will come off here, so it takes a little bit of prying. Just if it's a bit stuck, just use a flat screwdriver and just pry it off gently. You can take this case off here to get to the inside, and you can see again how disgusting that is inside. So probably get a good degreaser spray on this, then dry it all off and grease everything back up again. Any degreaser can you do. I've got a tinny Draper here, and the grease I'm using's actually got it for my dad's work, the electronics and stuff, but this is really good waterproof grease. Just any waterproof grease will do, so this is quite a good quality stuff. So just can make sure you got a good pack of grease for you too. Stage to get all this mess out and get all cleaned up, you've literally got to take, I'll show you just now, this little circlip here. Just take that off, obviously don't lose it. And what I'd probably do, and what I'm going to do, is just once it's off, turn this upside down, just push it against something flat, not too hard, but enough that should pop the bearings out, and the gears should all come out, and then basically just line them up the way they came. Then we'll get ready to clean everything out. Now I've got this little circlip off, I'll just give this a little push with my finger, and this, I'll try and do one hand with the phone, but this should just wiggle out. So just do it nice and gentle, just try and keep everything at the one time. So obviously this is the gear assembly here to be stripped apart, cleaned out, and this is the little front diff. So basically what this does to lock the wheels is when the little servo pulls, when you click it on, this just moves back and just locks in another gear just to stop the rotation. So you can see how much gunk's in there. So mine's been played up sometimes, not fully engaging all the time, but that'll be the answer there, just because it's so dirty. just not be gripping the teeth right. So we'll get this all cleaned out, and then it'll just be a case of reassembling this part. There shouldn't be too much more to do really. Because I'm doing this on my mobile, I think it's a bit difficult, so I've kind of balanced the camera up a bit, hopefully you can see. So just got my cleaner on here. Actually clean these bearings up as best you can, so get all the grime off them. There's a little pin, which I'll show you the order of how this comes in a second. So what I'll do, you kind of get the gist of what I'm doing, so I'll not bore you too much with more cleaning. I'll get everything cleaned, then I'll be back on the camera. Okay, I'll try to do my best to show you this, obviously, because I'm doing it off the phone. I'm going to get a better camera set up to do this, but for the next video or so. But on the other side of this shaft, obviously to get to your planetary gears for the rotation of the wheels, you can see there's 4 little 1.5mm bolts you've got to take off there, and once you've got them off, the top will lift up. There's the little planetary gears in there, and you see the dirt that's in there too. So spray that with sort of WD-40 or something like that, just anything to clean it out, degrease or whatever, as long as you only pack it back up with grease. And there's the main centre gear, which rotates the 3 of them, and you can see it's quite amazing how much filth actually does get in there. So I've just been packing this with a maintenance spray, kind of like a WD-40, just soaking it in. With this camera, if it focuses, don't know if it will. Yeah, it can focus there. Just let it spray around, and as I rotate it, you could take these right out, but I don't think there's too much need. It's just a case of lifting it out, but as you rotate it, just give it a little wipe, and you can see how much cleaner that's getting by the time. So it's just kind of repetition here. Sorry, that focus again. Just repetition here until you get as clean as you kind of think you can. And it's the same with all the other parts. Then we'll just reassemble the shaft, which I'll show you the order that goes in a little second. This cleaning process, before I actually show you that, just kind of the same for all the parts. Just spray, clean, repeat, nothing fancy. A bit kind of monotonous, but you start getting a little buzz out of it once you see you're getting a bit of progress. It's getting cleaning, and you can feel how much smoother that runs already. So I mean, that's going to make the little TRX4 run even better than it was, so it'll be as good as new again. Also, this process is pretty much identical for the rear portal axle. I'm not going to actually do that on video just because it's the same process. This side's a bit more complicated due to the steering, but the process for both sides is almost identical. So if you can do the front, you more than less certainly can do the back. Also, so when you're putting your grease in, you don't have to go absolutely insane. You don't want it too thick that it's starting to slow things down and clog it up, but you don't have to worry too much. But I'd probably say slightly more is better than not enough. So you just put that in, mix it up. Your finger, this focus isn't very good. It's a bit better there. So I apologise for that. So you can see it starting to work its way around the gears there, so just kind of help it along, and just as long as everything's nice and greased up, it's just going to turn around in there and spread evenly over time. Okay, now that's all assembled again. Just obviously if you take it out nice and neat, just put everything back the way you seen it, you can't really go wrong. I've got all my grease in here. I've greased up the shafts too after cleaning them out. It's just a case of putting the case back on. The only thing to watch for when you do this is the little circlip you took off earlier. Just make sure it's right in its little groove. You can see in the camera there's a very small groove it sits in, because you don't want that when you actually engage the actuator that it pings off and you lose it, and in effect the cable's actually doing nothing. So make sure that's right in the groove and tight on, give it a little tug, and that way you know it's pretty secure. Okay, now that's all assembled again. Just obviously if you take it out nice and neat, just put everything back the way you seen it, you can't really go wrong. I've got all my grease in here. I've greased up the shafts too after cleaning them out. It's just a case of putting the case back on. The only thing to watch for when you do this is the little circlip you took off earlier. Just make sure it's right in its little groove. You can see in the camera there's a very small groove it sits in, because you don't want that when you actually engage the actuator that it pings off and you lose it, and in effect the cables actually do nothing. So make sure that's right in the groove and tight on, give it a little tug, and that way you know it's pretty secure. Okay, that's me undone all these 2mm bolts, and just want to point out, just for everybody doing this in case they're worrying, that all the bolts are the exact same length, so if you put them in a pile you don't have to worry what order they come out, they all do the same job. So once they're out, we'll just re-pull and this will come off. So what you've got in here is the gear at the top I was telling you about, and your bigger gear at the bottom. So if you want to remove that gear, which I'll probably just clean in place because I don't really see the benefit of taking it right out, is there's a little grub screw here. Take your wheel hex off. This shaft should come through, and it's just a case of pulling the little gear out. There's nothing really too difficult about it, but I don't see why you should not be able to clean it in place, sorry. Also as well, bear in mind at the top there's a little bearing in there which I'm going to give a wee spray clean out, but just make sure that that's sitting nice and flush when you put everything back together, because it looks pretty fragile, so you don't want to be damaging it. That just holds the little gear end in there just to keep everything running nice and smooth when the little model's running. Happy you've got that all cleaned out, just pack it with grease again on both sides, just reverse the process, just you can't really go wrong, just engage basically the centre of the little gear into here, into the centre, and everything should just lock in nicely, and just make sure you just cross tighten everything when you put it back together, and just tighten it evenly, but don't over tighten anything too much because some of the parts are going into plastic, you don't want to strip any thread, so just take your time and repeat the process on the other side. Okay, once you've got that all back together, you're happy, you've got it all greased, everything's feeling smooth and running well. Same process for the other side, and once you've done that, that's the job pretty much done. So the only other thing left to tell you is just basically when you're putting it back together, make sure when you're inserting these in, the little slots at the end here, they line up. You'll feel it locking in and engaging on the inside, but you can't really go wrong, because if they're not locked and engaged in, this whole assembly won't go far enough back. So it's just a reverse process, take your time, just put it back together the other way and get back onto your TRX, and you'll notice a big difference after you've cleaned this out, I'm sure. Okay, that's me assembled everything, just went into the same process on the other side, so it's all connected, everything's looking good, happy days. So obviously to put this back on, it's just like I said before, reverse process, just take your time, just you can't really go wrong. Organisation's key. Everything you take off, line it up the way it came out, and when you put it back in, just do it in reverse order, and you can never go wrong. That's how I work on everything, whether it be my actual Land Rover at work when I'm an engineer or on my models. It's just keeping that process just really keeps you in the right. But like I say, it's not going back together tonight, because what I'm actually going to do is going to strip this whole thing down, give it a good clean up, grease everything up that I can, and then once I get my new motor, which should come in the weekend, get that back in and get some videos done with this again. Then I'll be moving on to either, I'm not too sure, don't think it's what I prefer to see, get my big petrol buggy back out. I've got a few parts coming for that, or get back to my little Tamiya TT01. This kind of had a bad crash, so it's kind of in the middle of a rebuild, so It's got a lot of cleaning out to do, put some new internals in it and get a new shell. So that's another thing I'm looking to do fairly soon. Thanks for watching the video, hope you liked it and hope it was very helpful, or at least a little bit helpful. MD, if you're not sure anything about doing that, just feel free to give me a message, and if I can I'll help you. That's certainly not a problem. Thanks for watching, bye.
Oh,